2 years ago, I kind of stuck my neck out a little bit and did a talk about aging, and it was very well received, mainly because I think there's a lot of us are in denial. And surprisingly enough, most of us are actually aging. What do you think about that? And so there's a lot of germane information that needs to be shared, and that's what we're going to do today. Only this time, I've got some real heavy hitters to help with that. So this is about successful aging. We have a very significant panel today, and I'm going to briefly introduce each participant. Miles Hurley is an attorney, and he is a certified elder law attorney, one of only 11 in the state of Georgia. Another of those 11 actually works in his practice. He founded Hurley Elder Care Law 25 years ago, and is a well-known, highly respected, not only for the way he and his firm serve Atlanta's seniors, but they also support the senior care industry in a pretty wide variety of ways, including teaching countless continuing education courses to senior care professionals. Jennifer Thilo is the Regional Vice President of Del Mar Gardens. She's been with Del Mar for over 24 years. She's an officer of the corporation based out of St. Louis. Del Mar provides a continuum of care from independent living through skilled nursing, and she has a tremendous amount of expertise in every aspect of senior living. Each community has a long-standing, long-established reputation for providing a warm, inviting atmosphere, and when you walk into one, it just feels like home. Larry Robert, he's also a Navy veteran. He served 12 years as a chaplain, commander in the Naval Reserve. Larry has been with VITAS Healthcare for 15 years and serves as their bereavement services manager and veteran liaison. VITAS is the largest hospice company in the United States and is known for their extraordinary service to veterans. Every day is Veterans Day at VITAS. Larry is also an accredited claims agent with the Department of Veterans Affairs, one of only 29 in the state of Georgia. And last but certainly not least is, I'll introduce myself as if I'm somebody else. I'm a principal with Griswold Home Care. I've been working as a senior care advisor in the industry for over 10 years and have helped hundreds of families find and implement the care they need, even when it's from services that are not part of what we do. In addition to serving as AVVBA's president, I serve as the board chair of the Atlanta Senior Care Network, an organization of over 300 senior care professionals in the metro Atlanta area. And all of our panelists, the companies that our panelists represent, are active members of ASCNN. So that's my justification for being part of this panel today. So let's move forward and let's talk about getting old, but not that long. Getting old is not for sissies. I'm sure many of you heard that. But the real question is, what can I do about it? We need to learn as much as we can, prepare, and act. And there's a variety of ways we can do that. And in a compressed amount of time today, we're going to talk about pretty much every aspect of aging, what we need to think about, what we need to process, and potentially what we need to do about it. So we'll start with preparing legally, and we'll start with Miles Hurley.
All right, so when we talk about being prepared legally, there's a whole lot of various things that go into that, but really kind of at the start, we want to make sure that everybody has their baseline set of legal documents in place. And so that's going to include a Georgia Advanced Directive for Healthcare. So this is a document that you execute where you appoint somebody to make your healthcare decisions for you when you cannot make them for yourself. So anytime you can make that decision for yourself, you're still going to get to do that. And then, as my grandmother used to say, this is also the plug pulling document. So when do you want your plug pulled? So it's where you're going to put on what your treatment preferences are. You're going to be able to choose whether you want to be buried or cremated, who would be your guardian if you ever need one of those, if you want to be an organ donor. And it also has a HIPAA release in it. So this is real important for allowing family members to be able to communicate with your medical providers. The second thing we're going to look at here is going to be the general durable power of attorney. And so this is looking at financial and property matters. Now in Georgia, we had a new statute passed regarding this in 2017. And so if your document happens to be older than that, you may want to review it, because in the new format, you are given actually added protections against a bad actor, but also methods for forcing financial institutions to accept the power of attorney. And when we start talking about this particular document, as we're talking in the aging world, there are a couple of powers that become very important in it. One is the ability to create trusts of any kind, and the other is the ability to make gifts, including making gifts to the person who is serving as the attorney in fact, because that attorney in fact typically is a spouse followed by children. So we want that person to be able to move assets to themselves. And without having those specific powers, you're not able to do that in the state of Georgia. So once we've got those two documents in place, then we want to think about how are we going to move assets from one generation to the next. The way that most people look at this is via a will. So a will is where you write down who you want things to go to and when, and who it is that you want to handle everything for you. Now, one of the issues that we, of course, have with a will is a will means absolutely nothing while you're A, living, and then B, prior to it going into the probate court. So a will is not the be all and end all, but it is a necessity. And then finally, in a lot of cases we look at, we think that maybe it's a better route to go through the use of a trust. And we can talk about a revocable trust, meaning that it is still able to be changed while you're living and have your wits about you, or an irrevocable trust in which you are giving up direct control over the assets that are placed into that trust. Now, one of the main reasons that we look at using a revocable trust is when somebody actually loses their cognitive capacity, it's much easier to go ahead and have the successor trustee step in and manage everything. Also, if everything is done and properly funded into that trust, it will actually be able to avoid having to go through the probate process. And if you actually happen to own property in more than one state, then you would not have to deal with probate in both states, provided the property has been put into the trust. Now, why do we use irrevocable trusts? Well, sometimes if we've got people who don't really have enough money over the long haul to be able to pay for their care out of pocket, and we're looking at eventually having to qualify for Medicaid or some of the VA benefits, then we may want to move assets into an irrevocable trust. The irrevocable trust would also protect the assets from creditors' claims, or if you caused a bad car wreck or anything else like that. So that is going to be my quick 100,000-foot view into a set of baseline documents that everyone needs. And there is certainly no one-size-fits-all. So in order to decide what may work best for anyone, I have to know everything from what are the health conditions that are involved, what would then be the time frame that we're looking at most likely for somebody to be in the world of needing care, what are the assets, are there any of them that are IRA type assets, and what is the income stream that we're looking at. So ultimately, what we look at in our law practice is helping people figure out how to find, get, and ultimately pay for good long-term care. And with the general philosophy being that we want people to live in the least restrictive environment possible for as long as possible. So with that, John, I will let whoever is up next.
Thank you, Miles. And I know we're covering a lot of ground in a very short time. My question to you is when our members are in their 70s or older, most of our spouses are in the similar age range. Should we wait until we start seeing issues to deal with to get this in place, or when do you suggest that we consult with an attorney to find out about what are these things that we need to get done?
So the general rule of thumb is that the earlier you act, the more choices you have. And so we also want to make sure that people act while they still have the cognitive ability to be able to execute documents and put a plan into place of whatever kind it may be.
I agree with that, and I appreciate that. I'm sure you have is more than I have, but I have dealt with a lot of families that wait so long that they really have they have a hole to dig out of, because their loved ones are at least marginally capable of dealing with things like this. So it's better to do it before that happens. Thank you, Miles. And I should have mentioned earlier, you all can post questions on the chat. And at the end, we are trying to allocate time for Q&A. And there's also going to be contact information at the end for each of our panelists if you want to follow up with questions about them individually. And the next thing I want to talk about basically is just normal aging and how to reduce the impact. And then to be very, very high level, most of this is pretty common sense, but lifestyle changes that can affect today how well we age has to do with lifestyle changes like healthy diet, regular exercise. Regular exercise, everyone hears about that. The fact is, it helps you think better. It improves your mood. It reduces risks of falls. I just heard yesterday that there's a 30%, 32%, I believe it is, increase in alcohol consumption in the United States once the pandemic started. And I'm not pro or con alcohol. I'm just saying it's a great opportunity to be more intentional about your healthy lifestyle. Next is thinking about where you live. A lot of people think about aging in place. My wife and I decided to move from a very senior unfriendly home to our current home, which is pretty senior friendly. We made that decision before we had to do it. And we will be able to stay here for a good while. We don't know how long, but certainly better than we would have been where we were. We also have the opportunity to go into independent living, assisted living, memory care, skilled nursing, as the case may dictate. And so we're going to talk about those in a minute, but for right now, I want to talk about aging in place. So next slide is about aging in place. Aging in place really is whether you're aging in place where you currently are now, or if, as like I said about us, we planned a downsize and utilized our assets to go toward our retirement from our other home. Most adults 65 plus say they want to age in place. I have to say that many of them say that because they really don't know what it's like to live in a senior living community, which can be very, very nice. Either way, you should seriously consider deciding sooner than later. If you need to downsize, if you need to move, make that decision sooner rather than later while it's easier to get it done. Next thing is to change or to look at how you live. If you're going to stay where you are, go ahead and make your home safer now. Be intentional about movement, driving, activities, especially when you're tired, and go ahead and get help before you have a life-changing event. Make your home safer. Brighter lighting inside and out can be very helpful. Keeping your walkways inside and outside clear and wide. Removing loose rugs and carpets. Installing handrails and grab bars. They can be done. They're very attractive. They don't have to look institutional. Make your bathroom as safe as possible, as soon as possible. 80% of people who end up in a skilled nursing facility get there because of a fall, and 80% of falls happen in the bathroom. So make your bathroom, focus on making your bathroom safer as soon as you can. Installing grab bars, non-slip mats, a shower chair with a wand-style shower head. When you're showering, you're closing your eyes. You have more of a tendency to fall, especially as you age, as you did when you were 25 years old. If you have a tub and you're showering in the tub, you might consider a transfer bench so that you can sit and slide into the tub rather than trying to step over the edge. Avoid driving at night. I don't know about you, but now when it's raining at night, I'm a little more uncomfortable than I used to be. So be aware of that and maybe either avoid driving in the rain at night or just be cautious of the route you take so you're not as likely to have an accident. Be more aware of fall risks. When I'm carrying something and walking across the parking lot, I am much more conscious of looking for the curb bumps and things like that, so I don't fall on that. Again, I mentioned avoiding risky activities like climbing ladders, especially when you're tired. And I just added here, sell your dirt bike, which I did several years ago. I still miss it, but that's one of the things you have to do. And John Douglas and I both sold our Harleys, so there you go. You got to do some of those things. Next thing is get help in your home. There's different ways of getting help in your home. Again, very high level. Most people have heard of hospice care. You may have all kinds of loaded opinions about hospice care. I don't think you should, but hospice care is one type of care. There's also palliative care, home health care, and then home care. So I'm asking Larry Robert to talk to us about hospice and palliative care and the differences. Larry?
Yeah, so when I first started with hospice, we always said that hospice care is palliative care. Now, in this day and age, and we have kind of divided that a little further. We have now hospice care, which is palliative care. All of hospice care is palliative care, but not all of palliative care is hospice care. So when we're looking at hospice care, it's something in which a physician orders for someone who has a life-threatening illness or a terminal illness, that there's a likelihood that within the next 90 days that that individual has a chance that they can die. They could die within that 90 days. And a doctor, two doctors actually certify that to be the case. And therefore, someone who is maybe going regularly to the doctor no longer needs to go regularly anymore, since all the care now is provided at home. And that type of care consists of all the medical equipment and consists of home health aides that help go to the home to bathe the patient, the individual in their own home. We can even provide a bed, a lot of times a hospital bed if needed, oxygen, all that kind of stuff, medications related to that terminal diagnosis, that life-threatening disease. And a nurse goes out maybe once or twice a week, depending upon the situation. Medicare guidelines say that a nurse needs to go out a minimum of once every 14 days. With VITAS, we make sure a nurse goes out a minimum of every week. And again, the purpose is comfort, is palliative. However, the medication provided is, of course, non-curative, but it's for comfort. Mainly narcotics and things of that nature are given, again, if needed. And it's not our purpose to get the person snowed under, if you will, but to get them to a place where they're comfortable enough to still be active and to be able to engage with their family members without being over medicated. And sometimes that's a fine line, and it takes time to get to that point at times, but that's our goal, is for comfort. So now when we look at palliative care, think of it as someone who has that newly diagnosed terminal illness, but still wants to look at other options. They're not ready yet to take that hospice plunge, if you will. A good example of that was with my own mother. She was diagnosed with a pulmonary fibrosis, so that's a terminal illness. So can COPD and other lung diseases, which are not curative, but yet that person is still very much independent and still taking medications that are considered curative, where hospice would not pay for, but they're medications that delay, if you will, the onset or further onset of maybe that pulmonary fibrosis or whatever the case may be. Another good example of this is maybe someone who has prostate cancer, which has metastasized The prostate cancer is pretty much held at bay, but yet now we have cancer in different areas. Person still wants maybe chemotherapy. They know it's not curative, but they're still wanting not to, if you will, give in to the disease, and they still want to try different types of themes. So related to their particular diagnosis. And by themes, I mean treatment regimens that are common for that particular illness. So palliative care is, you may think again, is if you go to the next slide, it begins at the discretion of the physician, whereby again hospice is physicians certify about the person's the 6 months to live. Before I think the slide said 90 days, but yet I'm sorry, it is 6 months of life expectancy or less is usually where the person is. The physician determines that that's the case. It's supportive care. Palliative care is supportive care without the curative intent, and whereas hospice is comfort care without curative intent. Keep in mind here, when we look at palliative, it may have a curative intent, but not always. So it depends upon the diagnosis and what the individual is going through and what the particular situation is involves.
Let me interrupt. This is part of a very well done single page document that VITAS provides. I'm going to forward that to everybody after this meeting so you can refer to it. And I don't mean to cut you off. I just covered that high level enough for now, and then you can follow up if you have questions at the end, or follow up with Larry if that's okay.
Just one other thing though. It says that it's typically takes place in the hospital. Yes, palliative care can take place in the hospital setting, but not always. I see it taking place most of the time at home as well.
Right, thank you. Okay, home health care. Some people, including physicians, sometimes refer to home care and home health care in the same breath as if it's the same thing. It's actually quite different. Home health care is doctor-ordered short-term curative treatment, and it's home health care when it's not feasible to travel for treatment. So it's typically short visits for a specific purpose or function, like wound care, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, much of which can be done in a facility. But if a person can't travel to do that, it's done in the home. So that's what home health care is. Then there's home care. Home care is rather than someone coming to a specific function, it's not doctor ordered. It is a block of time, typically 4 hours or more per shift. It provides assistance with activities of daily living, typically hands-on care, bathing, that sort of thing, and IADL, as they call it, companionship and support, instrumental activities of daily living. So that's what home care is. And the next slide, home care can be for transitional care for someone coming from the hospital or rehab, needing to get their strength back, but they need some help so that they're safe in their homes. And sometimes it's for a few days, sometimes it's for a few weeks. It could also be respite care, which is longer term situations, providing significant help, even if it's for short visits, even if it's for only once or twice a week. It can make a huge difference in the life of the primary caregiver, which is often the spouse. And again, it's typically 4 hours or more per shift, mostly because you really don't get much of a break if it's less than 4 hours. When my mother-in-law lived with us, she needed somebody with her all the time. She didn't need a lot of care. She just had to have someone with her. And so little by little, my wife became on duty, basically day and night, waiting for her to need something. And when we had somebody come in even once a week to start with, it made a huge difference to her. So it can be just a day a week, it could be 7 days a week, whatever it takes. Next thing I want to talk about is where you should live. If you are living at home, for example, and want to continue to live at home, then you need to explore, even now for future reference, explore the options of senior living communities. And there are really 4 different categories of senior living. So I'm going to let Jennifer talk about each of those, if you will, Jennifer.
Thank you, John. So I'll kind of discuss which each of these are, but I certainly would second John's recommendation to plan ahead, because I often deal with folks in crisis, and it's very overwhelming and hard to take in new information when you're stressed from usually it's a medical type of challenge. Next slide. So independent living, I think of it as a way of helping folks to actually be more independent than they might be in their own home, because people do want to stay at home, but if you can no longer drive and you're relying on people to bring you groceries and you're a little nervous climbing the stairs, you become actually much less independent. And many times if someone has lost a spouse, there's also an isolation. Being in an independent living community typically features a full-size apartment, maybe 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, there's even 3-bedroom apartments. You still have as much independence you like, but you can have housekeeping, meals, maintenance, and emergency type services. Usually there's a pull cord or a Warren button that you can push, the, help, I can't get up type buttons. But I think some of the biggest advantages is that you have the socialization, there's always transportation services, and you're not alone. And I see residents actually thrive and become more independent with that extra support. In choosing, I would definitely look beyond the building. There are many beautiful communities in the Atlanta area. So really look beyond that. There are a lot of major companies that are buying and selling senior living properties and gobbling them up. And I talk to my colleagues and they work for a different company. And also staff moves. When your ownership keeps changing, the staff doesn't have that loyalty, you lose that longevity, and I don't think that results in good, consistent care and service for residents. I would definitely, look online for reviews, talk to people you know. I think reputation is a huge, you ignore the outlier, but I think that's a good way to determine. And definitely avoid that crisis. Someone's in the hospital, someone's passed away, you've fallen. Try to do your research in advance. And I would say, I know for me, I would visit, when I buy a house, I go back a couple times. And I would say trust your gut as well. So assisted living can be very similar to independent living. At Belmar Gardens, our independent and assisted apartments are exactly the same size and setup. It's more typical for assisted living units to be smaller, maybe have a shared bedroom, living room area, a kitchenette rather than a full kitchen. But other than that, fairly similar, but you will have help with bathing, dressing, medication management. I do think that it's, again, important to look behind the fancy, pretty things and really watch the staff-resident interactions. And I think you can tell when they're sincere or not. Look at the residents, is their hair brushed? Does it look like there's food on them? The care is going to be much more important in assisted living. There's always gorgeous activity calendars, but it's amazing how often I have observed the activities are not always being held as scheduled. So watch for that. I think one of the biggest confusions and challenges with assisted living is very complex fee structures. Really make sure you understand. Belmar Gardens is, again, a little bit of an outlier. If you live in assisted living, if we provide those services, it's all included. But it's much more typical to have different levels, basic, super, deluxe, plus. Sometimes there's point systems. So for example, if you get 3 medicines a day, it's one rate. If you get 6 medicines, it's more, and so forth. If you're incontinent, that's going to cost more. Sometimes they try to figure out how many minutes a caregiver stays with you. I'm not saying that's a wrong way to do it, but it can be confusing, and I've heard folks be surprised when their fee goes up. So really make sure you understand that. So a memory care community, we call it enriched living because it really is a cognitive disorder and affects not just memory. I did a lot of research before we developed ours, and one thing I noticed is there's a lot of gimmicks, lots of trendy electronic things, state-of-the-art this, special iPads with speakers, gadgets in the bed to send off alarms, different colored plates and toilet seats, little things that speak to you throughout the day on a video. I watch my residents, and what they really respond to is loving human beings interacting with them. So I'm not saying there's no value to those things, but I think that's far less effective than that human contact. The other thing I notice is, especially in memory care, also in assisted living, I was given these really outrageous ratios of staff to resident, practically 1-to-1. And I couldn't figure that out, but they have a thing called universal worker, which means the person who provides the care does the housekeeping, loads the dishwasher, sets the tables, vacuums the rugs, answers the phone, and does the activities. And I'll tell you what that means. It means some stuff is just not getting done. And so, and especially because if someone calls out, the first thing to do is activities. And in my opinion, that's the most important thing for folks with cognitive problems. So I'm not saying that universal worker couldn't be done well, but I've seen a lot of them not. So for example, when you go into a memory care especially, look at the residents, look at how they look, observe staff interactions, and look to see if that long activity schedule, is that really being carried out, or are they sitting around looking bored and watching TV? So in a skilled nursing facility could be a short-term rehab, post-hospital, maybe a 6-week recovery, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, recovery after a stroke, heart attack, fracture. Medicare generally covers that 100% for the first 20 days. Or it could be long-term care. Someone just needs that nursing care level for the rest of their life. It's really important to choose your nursing home in advance because there's a real wide variety of quality, and it's hard to get into a good one if you're not coming directly from the hospital. So if you're in the hospital, you want to know which one you want to be in and fight for that. There's a star rating that's very confusing. They keep changing the criteria. I wouldn't even look at that, but you should. The nursing homes are inspected by the state. Read those surveys and see what they actually say. Most nursing homes will have some deficiencies they find. That's the nature of the survey. But there's a big difference between residents have a lot of wounds and, the food was cold that day. Again, I would visit a few times, observe the staff-resident interactions, and plan ahead. Don't make your decision in a crisis. So continuing care, there's generally two concepts of this. One is a buy-in, and you're basically putting down usually a minimum of about a $250,000 investment, and you'll be getting some of that back, usually on some type of prorated basis. I would definitely get an attorney, a financial advisor, have that contract examined before you sign it. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but they're very complicated. The other thing is there's just a fee for service. So Del Mar Gardens, we have all the different levels. You're never committed. You can come and go, but we prioritize you. You're not going to get money back someday, but you'll get what you pay for and you'll understand it. So they're two different, equally good options. I would definitely, again, really look for that reputation, especially if you're spending a lot of money. Talk to the residents. A buy-in is a big investment. But I think you can tell that I feel that it's the people, the longevity, and the quality of service that matters much more than the beautiful country club furnishings. Those can, I think those make less difference than the connections people form with each other.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. And how much does this cost? This is very rough. Aging in place can be zero. It can be a ton of money. It can be anything in between. So it depends on the situation that you're in. Independent living, this is a rough idea of what it might cost for an independent living community. Assisted living gives you you can see what that looks like. Memory care and skilled nursing. So none of it's cheap, but it's what you need to be thinking about. And so at some point you might need that. One of the questions came up about personal care homes. And the question, the way it was written was nursing home versus personal care home. I would have to say a personal care home is more comparable to an assisted living than a nursing care. nursing home care. And I have a little bit of experience with that. I'll just touch on that real briefly because we really don't have a lot of time. And we can talk about that offline, whoever wants to know more about that. But there are hundreds of personal care homes in Atlanta, and the quality of care from one to the other varies dramatically. And it can vary pretty dramatically from one month to the next in the same care home. What I've learned personally with my mother-in-law for a period of time. So we talk about how much it costs. Hospice care is funded by Medicare, as Larry mentioned. Palliative care is typically funded by Medicare or insurance, and there may be a copay. Home health is typically funded by Medicare, again, may require a copay. And home care, I would have to say on average, it would be at least $100 a week. And it could be a lot more, it could be a little bit more, depending on, and you call me, I give you numbers for everybody. It doesn't have to be for just us. How do we pay for this? Immediately, I would suggest you seriously look into reducing your discretionary spending and putting money aside, basically fund your own long-term care insurance, because it probably will be too long if you don't already have a long-term care policy to buy one. At least it may not be feasible to do it. So you can actually fund your own by putting money aside, reducing discretionary spending. If you downsize before you have to, you may have a sizable amount of equity that you can use and invest in, either just in cash or some kind of an instrument to use for a long-term care self-funded policy, if you will. Exploring VA benefits like aid and attendance. Larry's going to talk about benefits in a minute. Most of us, I think, would probably be beyond what aid and attendance is intended for. You may or may not qualify for it. It's intended primarily for people that really can't afford the health care that they really need. And so because they're a veteran, there's an ability to get some funding for your health care. Long-term care insurance, the only thing I want to say, think twice, 5 times, 100 times before you cancel it. If you've got long-term care insurance, hold on to it and talk to somebody before you make the decision to cancel it. Consider reverse mortgage. It's not always the right solution. It's not always a good solution, but it may be a good solution depending on the situation. And what that basically does is allows you to have funding from your equity in your home while you're still living there to help you pay for your care. And Medicaid, I'll talk about that in a second. Medicaid may or may not be appropriate for you. Both aid and attendance and Medicaid have a 5-year look-back period now. And so any transfer of assets will be looked into as a factor if you're ever going to look into Medicaid. Veterans benefits. Larry, real quickly, not a lot of time here. Those are 4 actually different resources. Veterans Benefits Administration, Veterans Health Administration. Just a sentence on when you would reach out to each one of those real quickly.
Yes, well, let me just comment real quick on Jennifer's presentation. Hospice care can be provided in each of those areas as well. As far as veteran benefits, every veteran should be looking to see if they qualify for any of the monetary benefits that are available through the VBA, and that's like the non-service connected pension, the aid and attendance, that's what you mentioned, John, and also if there are service connected benefits that they may be eligible for. I can't tell you how many times I get calls from people who are eligible and do not know that they're eligible for service connected compensation. And then of course there's the VA as far as the health system there. Everyone should be enrolled in Atlanta VA and see if they're eligible for any health care through there, especially as we get older, the geriatrics program there. Everything from respite care to hospice care paid for in a long-term care setting to adult daycare and respite care. And then for anybody wanting additional resources, please look at the National Resource Directory. It's a wealth of information related to the different types of organizations that are giving of their service for veterans. And then last is the conditions for service-connected disabilities depending upon when you serve. Military.com has done an excellent job in putting all of these in one place so you can look for yourself.
Thank you, Larry. And I am going to send a copy of this information so you don't have to try to write all that down. how do we pay for this? One of the options, which some people will just be awful to think this is an awful thing, but it may be an option for some people, is considered an annuity, which is single premium for long-term care benefits. There are some situations where that's a good thing to do. It can potentially double or more the amount that you invest in it for a continuity of benefits. Limited underwriting requirements is a benefit, and there are some tax advantages. I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying it's worth looking into. Medicaid, you may not make too much to qualify for Medicaid at some point in the future. You may not lose your house to Medicaid. Your spouse may keep income and assets. Medicaid is becoming the middle class. More people are considering Medicaid as part of their plan, if you will. Again, the last bullet's very important. I would definitely seek help and advice from an elder law attorney. And that is the last slide, except for the next ones, which are a contact information. And I'm not going to, I want to touch on a couple of things. Had a question on when Miles, if you're still there, I hope. Let's see, where is this question? How often should a will be updated if no changes in personal or family status?
If there's been no change in personal or family status, at most you probably just need to look at it and review it every 2 or 3 years. I mean, it doesn't mean you need to replace it. Just look at it and make sure it's still doing for you what you wanted it to do on the front end.
Would it make sense? Are there, like the advance directive or any of the other legal documents we discussed, do those need to be reviewed periodically?
Well, all of your documents should be reviewed just to make sure that you still have the same people named who you want named making those decisions, to make sure that none of them have deceased or moved out of state and really aren't available, any of those types of things.
Great. Thank you. Let's see here. Successful aging. I put you up first, Miles. I hope this is valid with you. Some of this was secondhand, but this is kind of when you would want to contact Miles or his team. Would you back up, please? Miles has a significant team. There's 3 attorneys on his team. He's got social workers. He's got a tremendous team of people that can help. So if you're looking at protecting your assets, and by the way, I don't consider that we have a lot of assets, but we did go through the same process that Miles described, because we do own a home, and that's an asset we need to make sure that we're protecting at some point in time. Finding and paying for long-term care, dealing with recent passing of a loved one. I don't even know what kind of issues might be there. It wouldn't hurt to call his office and check on that. And exploring aid and attendance. Anything you'd like to add about that, Miles?
Well, we also, of course, deal with all of the Medicaid issues that go along there, and qualifying people for Medicaid without having to literally spend all of their money before they can get on it. And then also, if we've got somebody who's running around a bit crazy and doesn't have anything in place, we deal with guardianship and conservatorship as well. You
hope that's a last resort, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And as you would guess, aid and attendance, VA aid and attendance and Medicaid are both government programs, so they're not simple. And it takes more than just a cursory understanding of what they're about to know whether, what to do about those. Next slide is Jennifer. Jennifer can help you with independent assisted living, memory care, short-term, long-term rehab, basically evaluating where you are in that continuum and where you might be, and understanding all the options and costs associated with that. Again, believe it or not, it's not quite as simple as you might think. There are people in independent living that need more care than would allow them to be in assisted living. And that's unusual, but sometimes that can happen. My mother lived in independent living and had enough care for her that she went straight from independent to skilled nursing. She bypassed the qualification and really the fit for assisted living. That may not be common, I don't know, but it was for her. Jennifer, is there anything you'd like to add about that, about when to talk to you?
I think you covered it well, and I do try to help people understand also a lot of what we've covered today regarding the benefits of hospice, or when Medicaid and Medicare and other benefits might fit in. We really try to help people figure out what's right for them. And I would like to give a shout out to my partners. John Griswold Home Care is in our community, and they also do rather than the 4 hours at a time, kind of that intermittent care for our residents. And also to Hurley Law, and this is true, we refer a lot of our residents to get assistance in getting Medicaid and other benefits. And we are always so glad when they go with Hurley because we know it'll be smooth and successful. And it's not always true with all attorneys that we see our clients work with. So I really am proud to be associated with both of you on this panel.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer.
That's very nice. Thank you. And Larry, where are you? Larry he wears more than one hat. Obviously, he works for a very well-known large hospice company, but he's also a veteran liaison and happens to also be one of the few accredited claims agents in Georgia. So if you're dealing with a situation where your loved one's care is becoming overwhelming, certainly you can call him, you can call me for that matter, and we can help figure out what the next steps might be.
Shout out to Miles as well. He's was an inspiration for me to get to where I am in.
What about me? Am I chopped liver? I mean, come on. Just kidding. If you're a veteran or a spouse of a veteran, or you know one, a spouse of a veteran that needs financial help to help with care, that's a good time to talk to Larry. And if you have an illness that may be related to military service, there are a lot of, presumptive that you may or may not be aware of. So those are contact information. I will forward that to everyone. One more slide, saving the best for last. I can help you with situational analysis and guidance on a pretty high level for about anything we've talked about today. I certainly don't consider myself a legal or a hospice expert or anything like that, but I can guide you to the right person. I do a lot of care assessments in people's homes and helping plan what the next steps might look like. And I'm also can help connect with other resources. So that is we crammed a lot in a short time.
John, can I ask a question? I joined late and I noticed you were recording this. Where can I watch it?
Anything for a friend for a fee, General. Yes, we will be posting this on our website as we do all of our meetings on our website. It'll take a little bit to edit it to get it ready to go, but it'll be available to everybody. And in this case, because there are resources listed in the PowerPoint, unless any of our panelists object, I probably will be glad to. I'll be glad to after the meeting you get back to me if you have a problem with that. I will forward the information of the PowerPoint itself to our members so they can review it if they need to. Miles, thank you so much for taking your valuable time to be here. Jennifer, thank you very much. I want to tell you I am so thrilled that your internet connection worked the entire time, not one freeze up today. That's great. For everybody too, but specifically for Jennifer because we had an issue last week. Larry, thank you so much. It's always good to see you and work with you.